It started with silence, a heavy silence that pressed down on every delegate in the galactic chamber like a suffocating blanket. Leaders of 67 spacefaring species sat shoulder to shoulder inside the Dome of Accord, a grand structure that floated just beyond the moons of Zarenth. It was supposed to be a summit of peace, a display of harmony between thousands of years of evolution and intelligence. But the silence meant something else today. A hologram flickered to life in the center of the dome. It showed Earth, the blue planet far on the outer edge of the galaxy. At first, there was nothing unusual. The oceans gleamed. The continents pulsed with life. But then the display zoomed in, faster than expected. The voice of the Archive AI crackled over the chamber, displaying the most dangerous zones of human planet Earth. Suddenly, hell opened. On the screen, a funnel of black clouds twisted across land like a living monster. Trees ripped from the ground, cars tossed into the sky like feathers. Beasts of wind tore homes apart in seconds. Tornado Alley, the Archive AI announced, calm and cold. Many delegates shifted uncomfortably. Their planets had never seen anything like that. A few of them whispered warnings to themselves in their native languages. But the display continued. Now it showed fire oceans of flame racing through forests, burning everything, even animals that tried to outrun it. The smoke reached into the sky, blotting out the sun. California wildfires. Earth category, annual. Containment probability, under 60% without human effort. In row 4, one human sat quietly, arms crossed. His name was Mason Grant. He didn't look shocked or afraid. In fact, when he saw the burning forests, he smirked. The alien beside him, a Saraxi diplomat covered in fine scales, noticed. "Amusing to you?" she whispered. Mason shrugged. "It's just fire. We put it out, or rebuild afterward. Either way, we move on." The next image came quickly. Frozen white land stretched endlessly. Temperatures read -50 degrees Celsius. A small outpost of humans huddled inside thick shelters, barely alive. Outside, wolves prowled silently. The wind howled like a beast of its own. Siberian expanse. Survivability without protection. Less than 5 minutes. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Cold like that would kill most species in seconds. One ambassador from the warm-blooded Torgos fainted in his seat. But Mason leaned forward now, smiling wider. "That's nothing. My uncle used to grill steaks outside in that weather. We call it camping." The hologram blinked again. Now it showed jungles, dense, unforgiving. Everything inside was alive and trying to kill. Snakes dropped from trees. Insects swarmed over a soldier's neck. Crocodiles snapped their jaws just feet from the camera drone. Amazon basin. Biodiversity. Lethal rate. Classified. Some delegates couldn't watch. The images were too raw, too brutal. These were not war zones. They were just parts of Earth. Alive, cruel, and somehow still home to humans. The last zone on display changed everything. A city skyline appeared, buried in swirling sand. The sun above it looked like a red orb, dull and angry. Then came the voice again. Death Valley, highest recorded temperature, 56.7 degrees Celsius. Uninhabitable for most life forms. Human activity recorded within the past week. The room broke into chaos. Alien leaders stood. Some shouted. Others accused Earth of falsifying data. No world could survive so many natural death traps. It was madness. A tall Jinthari leader pounded his clawed fist against the bench. "This is not a planet, it's a collection of horrors. Why are they not extinct?" A quieter voice answered him from row 4. "We're not extinct," Mason said. "Because we're not scared of nature. We are nature. Fire, ice, wind, sand, we've lived with it all. We learned, adapted, and survived." The room fell quiet again. Everyone turned toward the human in row 4. He wasn't wearing armor. Number. Weapons. Just a thin suit and a badge with his name. But there was something in his voice, something that made even the warrior races stop and listen. It wasn't pride. It was certainty. And something colder underneath. They say humans are a young species, Mason continued. But they don't realize how many of us died before we ever left our planet. Nature taught us the rules early. Get smart or get eaten. The archive AI beeped again. Incoming data packet. Earth military activity detected. Conflict rising in urban zone. The dome dimmed. New footage rolled in. This time it wasn't nature, it was humans. In streets, in war, using weapons. Not for survival but for dominance. A shadow passed over the council. The delegates had come expecting to discuss peace and science. Instead, they were staring into the teeth of a world that trained killers without needing enemies. A world that made its own monsters. Mason didn't blink as the screen showed. Soldiers dragging the wounded through broken streets. He didn't flinch at the sound of gunfire or the sight of blood. That's not a death world, he said quietly. That's just Tuesday, and for the first time, many of the galaxy's strongest species understood something terrifying. They had invited a species into the stars that didn't fear destruction, because Earth had been trying to destroy them since the beginning. The next day, the dome of the Galactic Council was quiet again, but something had changed in the air. No one looked at the human the same way. Mason Grant sat in the same seat, row 4, center left, but now, every glance toward him carried caution. Maybe even fear. The archive AI continued its program, showing the latest reports from Earth's surface. There were no volcanoes or storms this time. Instead, the footage showed a calm ocean, blue, wide, and peaceful. Birds flew low over the waves. A school of dolphins danced in the water. This region is known as the Pacific, the AI said. It is not currently classified as dangerous, but the calm didn't last. The feed cut to a dark shape rising from beneath the ocean. First a fin, then a massive shadow. Then teeth, rows and rows of sharp, bone-crushing teeth. White shark, the AI said. Predator. Capable of detecting blood from 3 kilometers away. Some delegates recoiled. One Velari scientist made a choking sound and turned pale. On her planet, the largest predator was the size of a small dog. She stared at the screen in horror, but Mason only leaned back and smiled. We swim with them sometimes. You just have to stay calm. Swim? Someone whispered. The screen changed again. This time it showed a city. People walking casually. On sidewalks. Children playing with balls. It looked normal. Then a loud roar broke the peace. A wild animal, a full-grown bear, rushed into the frame. It smashed a garbage bin, sniffed around, then casually walked away as people filmed it with their phones. Ursus arctos. Known as grizzly bear. Extremely dangerous. Yet sightings within human settlements are common. An ambassador from a planet with zero predatory life raised her voice. Why do your people not flee? Why do they not attack it? Mason answered without looking at her. Because we've learned that fear makes things worse. If you run, it chases you. If you stay calm, you survive. The next display was Stranger. It showed a frozen research station. People moved slowly between buildings, wrapped in layers of clothes. But then came the sound howling, not the wind. Something else, wolves. Thin, starving, yellow eyes glowing in the dark. Watching the humans, waiting, but never attacking. Not yet. Pack behavior detected, the AI said. Extreme patience. We'll wait days before striking. Testing human weakness. An alien officer leaned forward, confused. Why do they not destroy the creatures first? Mason chuckled. Because they're beautiful. Dangerous, yes, but beautiful. We respect the danger. We don't run from it. We live beside it. Now the room was split. Some delegates saw Mason's words as bravery. Others saw madness. One thing was clear: Earth had shaped its people with pain, hunger, and storms. But it had also given them something else: adaptation. That a tall, armored delegate from the Varnak Empire stood slowly. If your people have survived all this, why do you still fight each other? The room quieted again. That question had been hanging in the air since the last meeting. The videos of war, the blood, the screams. And Mason finally spoke, because survival wasn't enough. We wanted more. We wanted control, power, land. Sometimes greed. Sometimes fear. But mostly, it's because we are still learning how to live with each other. The Varnak delegate narrowed his eyes. And you want to live with us? No, Mason said calmly. We want to grow with you, but we won't beg. And we won't follow. If we join the stars, it'll be as equals. Or not at all. The room stayed silent for a long time. Then the archive AI did something no one expected. It opened a restricted file, one that hadn't been scheduled. The dome lights flickered. Even the guards turned as red lines danced across the floor. Unauthorized playback detected, the AI said. Source: Earth Defense Network. File marked level black, simulation training footage. The screen filled with chaos again. Soldiers, screams, drones flying, fires burning. But this wasn't war footage. It was a training ground. A training ground that looked more deadly than most alien battlefields. Humans in armored suits ran through crumbling buildings, while explosives burst around them. Massive machines, like walking tanks, fired from a distance. Still, the humans moved forward. They didn't run. They shouted, "Advance!" A younger human slipped, blood on his face, gasping. A teammate dragged him behind cover, yelling one word again and again. Some delegates stared in confusion. "This is training?" one whispered. Mason didn't explain this time. He let the footage speak for itself. A few in the chamber understood the horror, but also the discipline. Earth didn't just train fighters. It trained survivors, rescuers, builders of courage under fire, and perhaps that was the most dangerous zone of all. Not the tornadoes, the fires, or the predators, but the human mind trained to walk through them all and keep going. A council member from the peaceful Heltari species finally asked the question everyone feared. What happens when humans are no longer tested by Earth? Mason's answer came cold and quiet. Then the galaxy becomes the new test. For the first time in many cycles, the Galactic Council requested a closed-door session. No broadcasts, no observers. Only the delegates and one human. Mason stood in the center of the chamber, surrounded by species older and more advanced than his own. The Council demanded answers, not about Earth's environments, but about humans themselves. "What are you preparing for?" asked the Zorax representative, her body glowing faintly in stress colors. "We're not preparing for anything," Mason replied. "We're already living in it. War, fire, flood. You think we train for the worst. But for us, that's just life." A few members looked at each other. They had seen countless Earth visuals: monsoons swallowing towns, lava spilling down streets, buildings split by quakes. And somehow humans still thrived. But it wasn't survival that disturbed them. Now, it was something deeper. A word that echoed again and again through council whispers: enjoyment. The humans didn't just survive these disasters. Some of them laughed. They raced storms, climbed volcanoes, swam with sharks. They turned danger into entertainment. And that frightened everyone more than Earth itself. The archive AI began its next display. Now showing human recreation. The images were confusing. Humans on thin boards riding giant waves. Others jumping out of aircrafts with thin cloth on their backs. Some climbed freezing cliffs without ropes. One man ran across a desert until he collapsed, then got up again. Mason smiled slightly. "That's what we do for fun. You should see what we do when we're serious." A diplomat from the Kellic swarm hissed nervously. Why do you seek danger when you already live with so much? Mason thought for a moment before answering. Because it makes us sharper, braver. If we avoid fear, we grow weak. But if we chase it, we become something new. The chamber went still again. The Heltari ambassador, usually calm, stood with trembling arms. You say humans grow through fear, through chaos. But what happens when there's no more chaos left? Mason's voice was calm. Then we make it. That's what we did with space. It wasn't safe. But we came anyway. He wasn't bragging. He was telling the truth. That made it worse. The archive AI shifted again. Now playing Earth civil emergency footage, human civilian response. It wasn't war. Not soldiers. Just everyday people running toward burning buildings, pulling strangers from crushed cars, standing between wild animals and children. One video showed a young girl leading her injured father through a flooded street. Another showed an old man carrying 4 people across fire on his back. Human instinct to protect, strong. Reaction time in danger, fastest recorded among allied species. The data shocked the room. The humans were not just durable, they were decisive. In every recording, when chaos arrived, they moved first. Not always the strongest, but always the first. It wasn't just biology. It was choice. A silent realization passed through the council. Humans didn't just survive Deathworld conditions. They chose to protect each other inside them. They volunteered. For pain, for each other, and that made them terrifying. The archive AI blinked. Incoming signal from Earth. Translation, live broadcast. Human global leader requesting communication. A hologram appeared beside Mason. A woman stood on the other end, wearing a simple uniform. Her expression was firm but kind. This is Chancellor Reese of Earth. We know what your council is debating. And we understand your fear. No one spoke. She continued. Earth is not easy, but we made it home. We've learned things your species never had to. We can't change what made us, but we can choose what we become now. Her eyes swept across the delegates through the projection. We offer peace. We offer help. But make no mistake, we are not asking for permission to exist. She paused before her last sentence. We are humans. You can fear us, respect us, or join us. But we are here to stay. The feed ended. The room stayed silent. Then, unexpectedly, the council doors burst open. Not from Earth, from outside. Guards rushed in with news. An unknown fleet had appeared on the outer rim of the galactic border. No flag, no signal, no identification. They've already attacked one colony. A guard gasped. Minimal survivors. We need ships now. Panic rose in the chamber. Plans collapsed. Orders flew. Delegates shouted. Only one person didn't move. Mason Grant stood calmly, then stepped forward. We'll help, he said. But not because you asked. Because someone out there is hurting innocent people. And we don't ignore that. Room turned to him. You don't know the enemy, someone warned. Mason smiled. You didn't know Earth either. But you'll learn. Asterisk. The alien fleet didn't wait for talks or warning. It moved like a hammer through soft clay. Within hours, 2 more colonies had gone dark. Communications were cut. Rescue ships vanished. The few escape pods that made it out carried stories of precision attacks, emotionless invaders, and weapons no known species had ever seen before. The council panicked. Military ships scrambled from peaceful outposts. Emergency alliances formed within minutes. But deep down, most delegates knew they were already too late. The enemy wasn't attacking for resources. It wasn't taking prisoners. It was erasing, inside. The dome, the chaos grew louder until one calm voice broke through it all. We'll go first, Mason said, stepping forward. The room froze. The delegates turned toward him in disbelief. The human stood tall, eyes steady. He wasn't asking permission. He was announcing a fact. You can keep debating. But we're already launching. The Siraxi ambassador frowned. You mean your Earth military? No, Mason said. I mean a response team. Humans, volunteers, specialists trained in disaster zones. We're not built like your armies. We adapt mid-battle. And we don't panic when things go wrong. One delegate from the calm water planet Jenner stood. Your people are too unpredictable. If you fail, others die with you. Mason's answer was cold. If we do nothing, they die anyway. And just like that, the vote passed. The humans were cleared to respond. Within an hour, Earth ships jumped toward the edge of galactic space. They weren't sleek or beautiful like the ships of the Eldari or the Jinthari. They were rough, armored, and scarred from years of Earth's own wars. The lead ship, the Bastion, carried 75 humans. Not soldiers, not diplomats, but people who had lived through earthquakes, fought wildfires, pulled survivors from floods, and stopped city riots with only their voices. People who knew chaos and called it normal. As the ship neared the last known colony, everyone went silent. The crew listened to a voice on the emergency channel, repeating one phrase again and again. Help. We are still alive. Coordinates. Help us. Please. Mason's hand tightened on the armrest. Prepare for drop. We're going in. Low. On the surface, the colony was burning. Black smoke rose into the sky. Craters split the roads. Alien mechs patrolled the ruins, scanning for survivors. The enemy had no emotion, just patterns. Erase, move, erase again. The human team dropped hard and fast. No slow descent. No fancy shields. Just old Earth-style grit. The ship landed between two wrecked towers, then released boots on the ground. Invaders turned at once. Their machines locked on the humans. Guns powered up. Heat signatures shifted, but the humans were already moving. A woman named Yara launched a drone swarm overhead. Another, Jackson, ran into a collapsed building with nothing but a medkit and a flashlight. A pair of engineers leapt into a broken power core to stop an explosion before it reached the refugee shelters. They didn't hesitate. They didn't wait for orders. Every one of them had seen worse on Earth. The enemy noticed something was different. Their weapons should have been enough. But the humans weren't fighting like soldiers. They were fighting like survivors, improvising, flanking, using terrain like they were born in the rubble. Mason charged headfirst into a mech, dodging its blade and throwing a device that sent a high-pitched frequency through its sensors. The machine froze, just long enough for his teammate to plant an explosive and blast it apart. One of the survivors in hiding peeked out, eyes wide. You're human? She asked. Mason pulled her up with one hand. Yeah, and we're not leaving you here. The tide began to turn. Human teams split up across the ruins, finding survivors, creating barriers, hacking enemy signals. They didn't have better tech. They had better instincts. And slowly, the machines began to fall back. A council surveillance ship watching from orbit couldn't believe what it was seeing. The humans were pushing the enemy out, not with numbers, not with power, but with will. Back in the council chamber, a delegate muttered, "How are they doing this?" The answer came from the Siraxi diplomat, who had been watching Mason closely. Since the beginning, they've been doing this all their lives. Earth wasn't their enemy. It was their teacher. Down below, Mason found himself cornered near the last shelter. Two mechs moved in, weapons ready. Too close. Too fast. But he didn't run. He pulled a broken pipe from the wreckage, held it like a blade, and looked the machines in the face. "You want a real threat?" he growled. "You found one." Before the mechs could fire, another human dropped from above, slamming a charge into their backs. Fire lit the sky. Both machines collapsed into sparks and dust. Mason coughed through the smoke and smiled. "Tuesday," he whispered. The sun rose over the broken colony, painting the ruins in gold and smoke. Bodies of metal invaders lay scattered across the streets, limbs twisted, sensors shattered. Human rescue teams moved through the wreckage, guiding survivors out from bunkers and burned buildings. Some wept, some limped. All of them lived. Mason stood near a crater where the final enemy mech had fallen. His arms were bruised. Blood ran down his sleeve. But he was smiling. Behind him, a young boy held tightly onto his mother. They didn't speak the same language, but when the child raised his hand in a salute, Mason nodded back. "Evac complete," said Yara, checking her device. All survivors accounted for. 0 human casualties. The Council's ships arrived 20 minutes later. They came with medbots, food packs, and security units. But when they landed, all they saw were humans already handling everything. Many delegates watching from orbit. It was their first time seeing humans not as unpredictable wildcards, but as protectors. The next council session was called Emergency Time. This time, the mood was different. The room was silent again, but not from fear. From respect, the Varnak commander who had once doubted Mason now stood to speak. "Your people are not what we expected. You are more dangerous than we thought, but also more loyal." Mason didn't smile. He wasn't interested in praise. "We don't do this for approval," he said. "We do it because someone has to." The Saraxi ambassador leaned forward. "You've proven humans can act in chaos. But that fleet is still out there. You won a battle." "Not the war," Mason nodded. "Then we fight the war next." Back on Earth, messages poured in. Colonies asked for human training. Spaceports requested joint patrols. Even species that once feared humans now wanted to understand how they did what they did. One message stood out. It wasn't from a government or a leader. It was from a child on a colony that had barely escaped. She had drawn a picture of Mason, holding back a wave of fire with one hand and carrying 3 children in the other. The message was simple. "Thank you, Row 4 human." He saved that one. Later that night, as Mason reviewed maps of enemy fleet movement, Yara approached quietly. "They're not machines," she said. "We finally cracked their signal. There's something else, organic minds inside mechanical shells. Grown for war, no mercy code. No surrender command." Mason stared at the blinking stars on the screen. The enemy wasn't just unknown anymore. They were intelligent. They were planning. "We've dealt with worse," he said. YRA raised an eyebrow. "Have we?" Mason looked her in the eyes. "We grew up in cities where gangs ruled the streets. We crossed rivers during floods with babies on our backs. We went to school during storms, worked during blackouts, and lived while the world tried to kill us." He pointed to the flashing red zone. "They think fear wins battles. But fear is just Tuesday to us." The next day, human ships led a new fleet this time, with backup from 5 alien species. It wasn't a full alliance. Not yet, but it was enough as they jumped into enemy space. Mason spoke to the crew. "You've trained in fire, floods, earthquakes, storms, and war. You were built by Earth to survive anything. And now we prove Earth built us right." The screen showed the first enemy ship. Bigger than the others, scarred from old battles. A strange red glow pulsing from its core. The humans didn't stop. They charged forward, not as conquerors, but as defenders. Not because they had better weapons, but because they had better reasons. As the first shots were fired, one alien commander watching from afar asked a question softly. "What kind of species runs toward death and calls it duty?" Another answered in a whisper. "The kind that learns to laugh at death before it ever leaves home." Asterisk. The battle began with silence, then exploded into light, in deep space, far beyond any mapped system. The human-led fleet clashed with the enemy. The invader ships moved like living metal shifting shape, merging mid-flight, repairing even as they burned. The other species held their lines, but only barely. They had trained for war, but not like this. Only the humans advanced. Mason's voice came through every ship's comms. push forward. They're stronger, but they're not braver. The enemy flagship opened with a massive energy pulse. It tore through shields and split one alien cruiser in half. Fires spread across the void. A pilot screamed before his signal went dead. But instead of falling back, the human ships moved faster. They didn't fly in straight lines. They darted zigzag, looped like storm chasers through a tornado. Mason's ship spun under a beam of plasma, came up on the flagship's left, and fired 2 EMP torpedoes point blank. The explosion knocked systems offline, but not enough. The enemy recovered quickly. Smaller drones spilled out from its hull like black insects. They latched onto allied ships, cutting deep. Yara screamed into the comms, "We're losing control." But then, something no one expected happened. The humans turned off their lights. One by one, every Earthship went dark. No signals, no shields, no sound. Just drifting wreckage or so. The enemy hesitated, and that hesitation gave Mason just enough time. From within the dark, the Bastion launched one last maneuver. Not with missiles, not with speed, but with a dive straight into the enemy flagship, not to destroy it, but to board it. Inside the enemy ship, it was worse than anything on Earth. Metal walls pulsed like veins. The air was heavy, wet, almost alive. Shapes moved in the shadows, half machine, half organic, clicking in a language no translator could touch. Mason and his team moved quickly. Their suits barely held up. But they pushed through, weaponless now, using what Earth had given them: courage, pain tolerance, and instinct. They reached the core. It was not a machine dot, it was a living mind suspended in wires, floating in fluid, watching them with one giant eye. It spoke directly to their brains, wordless, cold. "Why do you fight what you cannot win?" Mason stepped forward, blood on his face, smoke on his breath. "Because giving up never made sense to us." "You think we're afraid of death?" "Earth made sure we got used to it early." The creature pulsed in anger. "You fear nothing?" Mason looked it dead in the eye. "We fear something, but it's not you. It's letting others die when we could have." Stopped it. Then he reached into his suit and pulled out a memory core. Earth tech, old, scarred, but inside it was something no. Other species had 10,000 years of human survival data, disasters, wars, tragedies, recovery. He jammed it into the alien core. The creature screamed. Not from pain but from shock. It saw everything. It saw hurricanes flatten cities, only for humans to rebuild them. It saw children carrying water through burning forests. Soldiers digging graves for enemies. Families holding each other as the ground split apart. It saw humans laughing in the face of it all, and it didn't understand. The connection broke. The creature released a final signal, a shriek across space. Its drones froze. The enemy ships stopped moving. Then, one by one, they powered down. The war ended, not with destruction, but with understanding. The alien force withdrew. Not defeated by weapons, but by the weight of what humans carried inside them. Pain, hope, madness. We'll dot back on the council floor. The message came in. Enemy retreating. All colonies safe. Earth team returning. Delegates stood in silence. They didn't cheer. They didn't clap. They just stared at the empty chair in row 4. Mason was still out there. 2 days later, his ship returned. Battered, smoking, but whole. He walked into the chamber, dirt on his boots, and dropped a broken piece of the enemy's core on the floor. No more threats. Not from them. Not now. The Serexi ambassador stepped forward. "What do you want, human?" Mason looked around the room. "I want you to stop treating Earth like a mystery. We're not a death world. We're a birthplace of survivors. We don't need fear to lead us. We just need a reason. And protecting others? That's reason enough." One delegate whispered, "You laugh in the face of danger." Mason smiled. "We don't laugh because it's funny. We laugh because we already lived through worse." As he walked back to row 4, His seat remained unchanged. But now, every eye in the chamber saw it differently. Not just a chair, but the seat of a species that made the galaxy blink first.